Test. Welcome everyone to the regular meeting of the San Rafael City Council for Monday, September 20th, 2021. Good evening. I'm Vice Mayor Mary Beth Bushey. Tonight, I'm acting as Mayor Pro Tem because our Mayor Kate Collin is out of town on a well-deserved vacation. I would ask the City Clerk to now call the roll.
Councilmember Hill.
Here.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Here.
Councilmember Yerens Galati.
Here.
Mayor Kate is absent, so Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
I'm present. That completes the roll. I would now ask the city attorney whether our previous meeting that we held in closed session, whether there was any reportable actions from that meeting.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey. There was no reportable action taken in closed session by the council this evening. Thank you. Thank you.
We then will begin on the regular agenda for tonight. As a quick preview, our first two matters address the same topic, climate change. No topic could be more urgent or more important to us at this time. Our two matters we begin with a global matter, global in scope, which makes sense given the scope of the issue. We then move to a more local matter, talking about what we're doing here in San Rafael. Our final matter for the night is the most local of matters, and that is an update to our budget. But before we start that, we will begin with a land acknowledgement. We honor the original indigenous people who have lived and are living in San Rafael. This city is traditionally home to the Coast Miwok people, and we thank the original inhabitants of this land and honor them with their continuing involvement in stewardship practices that benefit us all. We will now move to comments from the public on topics that are not on tonight's agenda. I'll ask the city clerk to explain to members of the public who wish to provide comment.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey. At this time, I would like to ask staff to turn off their cameras. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube, and viewers can provide comments by telephone by calling 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 899-2635-9885, or they can comment and watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda. Please note that we're no longer accepting public comments through YouTube's live chat. If you're commenting over the telephone, please press *9 when the public comment period has opened. And once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. If commenting through Zoom, please use the raised hand feature and let us know that you would like to speak, and then wait until you've been unmuted. If you experience any technical difficulties, please email me at city.clerk@cityofsanrafael.org. Closed captioning is available for this meeting, and I'll include the link in the Zoom chat now. At this time, if there's anyone who, just post that link. If we were moving to public time for open expression, there is one hand raised. We have our public comment timer.
Let's begin the public comment then.
Yes, thank you.
My name is Pamela Reeves, and I'd like to thank you, Vice Mayor Bushey and City Council members for listening tonight. I've been a longtime resident of Terra Linda, and tonight I'm asking that the city take more steps to address the continuing increase of speeding vehicles on Las Colindas, Las Galinas, and Freitas. And I'm sure there's many more neighborhoods that this is going on. This happens to be my neighborhood. They are people of all ages and all makes of vehicles, and I'm sorry to say, including electric vehicles. Many cars do not even begin to slow down at the four-way stop at Las Galinas and Las Colindas. Drag racing is now taking place on Freitas, Las Galinas, and Las Colindas, especially around 3:30 or 10:30 at night. And Councilmember Kurtz has been very quick to work with the city staff who've been responsive to her to more striping has been put on these street corners. However, it has not changed the behavior. And Safe Routes to Schools has been alerted. I've talked with Supervisor Aide Mary Sackett, who lives in the neighborhood, and found out how dangerous it is for the kids to ride their bikes to school. It's dangerous for me. I walk all the time, to even walk in the crosswalk, because people are going 45 miles an hour down Las Colinas when they veer left. So it's just extremely dangerous. And I don't know what can be done unless people start getting tickets, unless they're punished for their behavior. I don't know what could change. So I hope you please consider different solutions to calm our city. Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, but for anyone who's joined the meeting since we've opened, we are currently providing public comments for items that are not on this evening's agenda. And I'll give everyone about 5 seconds to raise their hands or press *9 if calling in. I see no other public comment.
Thank you, City Clerk. And thank you, Ms. Reese, for your comments. Because it's not on the agenda, we can't take any actions, but your information has been provided to all of these city employees that are on this meeting. And we will take it under advisement and take actions as are necessary. Let's move on then to the city manager's report. City Manager Schutz.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and Council. I have a few brief updates and announcements tonight. Last week, the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District held a virtual public meeting on the draft Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, for the relocated or to be relocated transit center in downtown San Rafael and the overall project alternatives. Golden Gate is accepting comments on this draft EIR until October 12th. So there's still a few weeks left to comment. At the San Rafael City Council's next meeting on October 4th, staff will be presenting our initial comments for the City Council's input and modification. So we'll be bringing that to your very next City Council meeting. For those community members that are interested in this topic, this is mostly just a little commercial for our next City Council meeting because it's a big topic around the transit center and alternative locations for the transit center downtown. So again, that will be it's the first Monday night in October at 7 p.m. Meanwhile, the draft EIR and the project update can be found at Golden Gate's website, which is goldengate.org. And then the specific project page is easy to find because it's /SRTC, which stands for San Rafael Transit Center. My next topic is that at last week's City Council meeting, I used the whole city manager report on the topic of wildfire, and Battalion Chief Matt Windrum and Emergency Manager Quinn Gardner presented information about recent wildfires that were local and the work of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, or MWPA. Tonight, I wanted to just briefly mention Zonehaven again and a couple of upcoming public meetings for any community members that want to get more involved on this in this topic. Zonehaven is the MWPA, or Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, funded update to the regional evacuation system. And MWPA is coordinating a public rollout and outreach around Zonehaven this month to kind of raise awareness about it. There's a video which I think does a really great job at describing what it is that MWPA put together, and it has kind of does a little scenario of what someone might be going through in their home as an emergency takes place and how they would respond to it. That's a YouTube video that you could find by looking for "Get Ready Marin County, Know Your Zone." And the video itself is less than 3 minutes, but I think it does a really nice job of explaining what Zonehaven is and what this new tool is that we have in Marin County around evacuation. For those that want to hear more, there's a couple opportunities that are coming up this week. The first is that we regularly do Get Ready classes, and there's one tomorrow at lunchtime. So sounds like a good brown bag opportunity. 1 hour to get ready. It's a 1 hour class. And it focuses on things you could do at your home and your family to be more prepared for emergency or large scale
You're on the
disaster.
thing.
Sorry.
And it offers easy instructions and takes questions from residents as well. So that's in English Tuesday and on Spanish on Friday at 5:30 p.m. And I'm going to provide a link here at the end. And then on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m., Quinn Gardner is also hosting, along with fire staff, a community wildfire forum. So to kind of let's go into more detail than what we covered at the last city council meeting and answer all the questions that the community might have around wildfire prevention efforts that have been going on and that are upcoming in San Rafael and really throughout the county through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. So both of those events are listed under our upcoming events at cityofsanrafael.org. So if you just go to cityofsanrafael.org, upcoming events, you'll see them both there. And that will have links to where to find them, what the links are, how to register, all of those sorts of things. So we often have these kind of things around wildfire, but there's 2 happening this week. So I just wanted to bring those up tonight. And I will turn it back over to Mayor Pro Tem Bushey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sure the event hosted by Quinn will be very well attended. And will be extremely informative, both of them. Let's move on to council member reports. It's only been a week since our last meeting, so I imagine we've been busy, but not a month's worth. So let's begin with Council Member Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have one meeting that I attended that I will report on. So folks know I serve as the San Rafael representative to the Association of Bay Area Governments, also known as ABAG, in the General Assembly, and was appointed as the Marin County alternate for the Executive Board. The Executive Board had its monthly meeting last Thursday, at which there was a report out on the Plan Bay Area 2050 implementation plan. This is distinguished from the actual plan insofar as it focuses on the 5-year near-term actions that ABAG and Metropolitan Transportation Commission will take against the 35 strategies that they identified along the 4 core elements of economy, environment, housing, and transportation. So they outline that. And then at the upcoming meeting, they will be considering for adoption the final Plan Bay Area 2050. This ABAG is largely an advisory body, but it is represented by the 9 Bay Area counties. So a lot of regional action is taken from this body. I would also like to note that the upcoming regional housing needs assessment appeals are going to be considered over the next couple weeks. For folks' awareness, San Rafael did submit a letter indicating that we would not be appealing our allocation of 3,220, but we did assert that we would not like to take on additional numbers. So that is my report, and I'll turn it back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Hill. We'll move on to Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you. There were a couple of important meetings that happened. Unfortunately, they were scheduled on Thursday, which was Yom Kippur, so I wasn't able to attend. I'm happy they were recorded. So the first one was that I'm caught up on is around the County Homeless Committee that we're working on with a review and ranking and the funding that's available now for organizations who are providing different services for the homeless. We'll be submitting their applications for some additional funding. So that's a good process, and we'll be going through some training with that. The second one was the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority had their board meeting, and I'm still catching up on that one. So report back, but I'm glad City Manager Schutz provided the update on Zone Haven, which is very, very important.
Thank you. Moving on, Councilmember Lawrence Garlotti.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I had a really nice weekend, and let's see if my connection is unstable. I think it's okay. On Saturday, we were celebrating the International Coastal Cleanup Day, and we had a great event in the canal And after the cleanup, we actually had a listening session in English and Spanish. So I wanted to especially thank our amazing staff, Corey, Thomas, Walter, and Eleanor, for providing all the logistics and also to help us spread the word with our CBO partners. And our city manager was there as well with his lovely family. And we have many residents from the Canal, from Spinnaker and Bay Point, Luma and Alcohol Justice, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce, East San Rafael businesses, the Harbor Rotary Club. So it was actually very successful, and it was great to see the entire community coming together. And then on Sunday, I was participating in the Sustainable San Rafael meeting. So thank you so much, Bill Carney and the board for inviting me. Our council member Kurtz was also there as well. And it's just amazing how the expertise that we have here in San Rafael and in Marin County, we are so lucky around the climate and the environment, not just the expertise, but also the passion that they bring. So I was very excited to be part of that. And they were recognizing 3 sustainable heroes around the implementation of EV chargers in 9 schools in San Rafael. So it was actually really nice for Rachel and I to see the work that happened, on the school board, and the fact that it's something that in government, sometimes you see the projects, but you don't necessarily see them implemented. So it was extremely nice to recognize the collaboration between the school district and TAM and Dale, and being able to provide those EV charges in 9 schools. So that was my week on my weekend. Thank you.
And a very busy week for all council members. In only 1 week, we did all of this. I attended and spoke at a Marin Evening Rotary meeting on Tuesday. And on Thursday, I was honored to fill in for the mayor at a ribbon cutting for the Mind Therapy Residential Treatment Center on E Street. Ribbon cuttings are one of the most fun things to do as a member of the city council. So I really enjoyed that. All right, that takes care of those reports. Let's move on to the consent calendar. I believe there are 3 items on the consent calendar. Does anyone wish to remove any of those from the consent calendar? Seeing none, then all 3 will be treated as 1 item. I'll ask the city clerk to call for public comment.
To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. And if commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you've heard the notification that you're allowed to speak, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide public comment, and then they will be muted once time has elapsed. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can email me at city.clerk@cityofsanrafael.org. And I would request the public comment timer, as well as any raised hands. And I'll give everyone about 5 to 10 seconds. I don't see any at this moment. I see no public comment.
Thank you. Would any council member like to make a motion regarding the consent calendar?
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. City clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Yerans Gladi.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
Aye. Matter carries 4-0. We'll move on then to agenda item 6A, the climate emergency declaration. And I'm looking for our esteemed manager, Corey Bidoff. And there he is. Actually, Corey, you're not showing on my screen if you are.
Okay. Hello, Mayor.
There you are. Now you're here.
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
If I took myself off chat, that would help. I mean, off of mute. I'll share my screen and walk you through these presentations. Okay. Is everybody seeing my screen okay? Wonderful. Great. Okay, so 2 items, as Mayor Pro Tem Bushey mentioned. First, we'll go through the climate emergency declaration, and then we'll stop so you can ask questions and hold public comment and then make a decision, and then we'll move on to the next. So many people have been asking us, including several organizations, to consider adopting a climate emergency declaration for the past year or more now. And we've been a little reluctant because we prefer to focus most of our time on implementation. However, the International Panel on Climate Change came out with a report this August that really highlighted the need for urgent action, which really aligns well with the climate emergency declaration. And there are other reasons to do it as well. But a handful of things that came out of that report. First of all, warming continues to go faster than we'd anticipated, than the projections were. Every region is facing changes due to the climate and impacts due to the climate. The heat waves, warming season, shorter, colder seasons are all increasing, droughts and things like that. They've documented this time in great detail the human attribution for climate change. And most sobering have basically said that we have about 2 decades to keep ourselves below 1.5 degrees Celsius if we're going to keep the planet habitable for our species. So here are the things that are in the climate emergency declaration. I know you have it in front of you and you've read it. Just highlight the 5 kind of key things that I think are in the climate emergency resolution. One is that it resets our long-term target to align with the state target. It commits us to taking climate into account for all of our major decision-making. It commits us to advocating on behalf of climate action to other larger entities. It commits us to helping achieve an equitable and just transition to a green economy and a resilient community. And it recommits us to climate action as well as adaptation. And if we were to adopt a climate emergency declaration tonight, we would be joining 6 other jurisdictions in the county, including the County of Marin and several cities and towns. So the first item, resetting our long-term target. So right now in our climate action plan, we reference an older state long-term target of an 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2050. What this does is it aligns us with the newer state target, which is basically net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And another reason for the urgency is that our greenhouse gas emissions will be in the atmosphere for decades. So even if we shut off all of our greenhouse gas emissions tomorrow, which we won't, we'll continue to see increased warming for decades. The California Air Resources Board is developing a scoping plan to really lay out the pathway to carbon neutral by 2045. Which is another reason to align with that, to make sure that we actually are aligned with what can actually happen. However, I know that there are discussions at the state, and the governor has asked the Air Resources Board as well to consider a scoping plan for 2035. If the state were to change the long-term targets, then we would be compelled to look at that again as well and consider that. Taking climate action in all major decision-making. We've nicely set that up in the San Rafael General Plan. That was a robust multi-year discussion, and we do make sure that all of our major decision-making aligns with the general plan, which includes the climate action plan and climate action plan measures. In terms of advocacy, we're affiliated with a lot of different organizations that do advocacy, or that try to make sure that the state and federal government are aligned as much as possible with our goals as well. We do write letters in support of things or in opposition to things as well. For instance, for the California Product Stewardship Council, whenever there's an initiative to try to have take-back programs or to recycle things such as solar panels, and we usually will write letters of support. In terms of a just transition, one of the big projects that I think you all know that we're working on this year is looking at climate action in service of our community, in service of green jobs and workforce development and economic development here in San Rafael. And so we are tackling a just transition head on as well. And finally, this is a snapshot of the 7 priority areas that I brought to council with the climate action plan back in May. So this is our 2-year fiscal year priority setting. And you'll notice that in 3 of these items relate to some of the letters that we received in support of the climate emergency declaration, the electric vehicle strategy, electrification of buildings, and mandatory composting. And finally, what's also in the climate action plan is in the climate emergency declaration is an acknowledgement that we all need to do our part. This is the portfolio of emissions where they all come from in San Rafael in our in-boundary emissions inventory. But again, this is our San Rafael greenhouse gas emissions portfolio, and the city of San Rafael only contributes less than 1% of that. So we don't get to 40% unless we have the majority of our businesses and residents on board and working toward climate action as well. And finally, it's really important to note that our greenhouse gas inventories, again, are really reflective of what we're producing directly right here in San Rafael. What happens in San Rafael gets counted in San Rafael. But consumption is another big piece of climate change. And so all that yummy wine we get from Argentina, or those products that we buy abroad, you know, there's a lot of mining and growing and producing and refining and packaging and shipping and all that goes into it. And the embedded greenhouse gas emissions are tremendous. So when we look at an in-boundary inventory, which is what we do with our greenhouse gas inventories, we calculate roughly 15 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per household. If we were to look at our consumption, what we do here in Marin, we would triple that. Our carbon footprint would be triple what we're calculating. So as a recap, the Climate Emergency Declaration, we have these 5 major items that are in there. And at this point, I'll stop and take questions and see if you have any comments.
Thank you so much. We'll have questions from council members. And just as a heads up, I'm going to go in a different order. So we'll start with Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you for the update. And, you know, you think about 2045 and it sounds far out, but then when I think about, I'll just be in my mid 70s, it doesn't seem that far out. So it's really, it's so important that we're doing this. And I was wondering if there's been any other discussion. We moved, that target moved to 2045. Is there any discussion that might even move in more?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just so challenging, you know, the impacts, the potential unintended consequences, the cost, you know, it's just a very challenging thing. So I haven't seen any roadmap that can get us there sooner than 2045. But absolutely, I think that there's going to, you know, every time these IPCC reports come out, they say, wow, things are actually worse than we thought, and they're getting worse faster. So definitely.
Next questions from Councilmember Lorenz-Galati.
Thank you. No questions at this time. I just have some comments, but I'll save it for later. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Corey, thank you for all of the work, and thank you to all of our predecessors for laying the groundwork for this. I guess my question is more, because I know that you are definitely connected very deeply among regional stakeholders around the concept of a climate emergency declaration. It does seem like other municipalities did declare these earlier, and I appreciated your comments as to why we delayed jumping out in front. But I guess my question is, could you elaborate a little bit further? Because I do think that there was intentionality around it, but I would love to hear an elaboration on our deferral until now.
Sure. I would say that, again, the big piece for us is climate action plans. Many cities and towns have climate action plans, but don't necessarily put their money where their mouth is and don't really do a lot with the implementation, rely more on the state or regional efforts to make the greenhouse gas emissions happen. When we got our latest greenhouse gas inventories and we redid our climate action plan, what we realized was that the majority of emissions reductions in the early part, those first 25% reductions that we got, were really due to the state and regional efforts. And the big lift now is going to be on the cities. If we're going to get to 40%, the majority of greenhouse gas emissions that we're going to reduce are going to come from local actions. That's a big deal. So it's more important than ever to focus our time and attention on the implementation. And so that's why it wasn't at the forefront of top priority. It was more important to figure out what are the things that we need to do that have the biggest bang for the buck, and how do we align all the support to make them happen, the finances, and whatever else we need, the technical assistance to make those happen. So that's why we've delayed it.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
You're muted.
We'll turn now to public comment. I'll ask the city clerk to organize our public commenters.
Thank you. To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. And if by commenting by telephone, please press *9. Once you've heard the notification that the host is inviting you to speak, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to provide public comment, and then they will be muted once time has elapsed. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can email me at city.clerk@cityofsanrafael.org. Go ahead, Robin.
Good evening, Pro Tem, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and council members and staff. My name is David Mahler. I live in Larkspur and I lead and participate in several local climate action groups. I want to start by commending the council and staff for the recent update of San Rafael's General Plan 2040 and identifying in its Climate Action Plan 2030 many priority actions needed to significantly reduce San Rafael's greenhouse gas emissions. A climate emergency declaration is the next logical step in making sure climate stays front and center in San Rafael's decision-making processes and that those actions identified are actually taken. It also allows San Rafael to reset its long-term greenhouse gas reduction goals to align with state targets while recommitting to rapid climate action. As clearly stated in the Climate Emergency Declaration, we're in an emergency situation here. The declaration underscores the urgency of acting now while clarifying the path forward toward addressing this crisis and emerging into a better future. And I want to say it's notable that the declaration commits San Rafael to meet these goals in ways that also build an equitable society and a thriving economy. Our climate crisis can feel overwhelming and lead both individuals and communities to wonder what they can possibly do to help address such big issues. Well, I want to say this climate emergency declaration is a perfect example of what individuals and communities can do by thinking globally and acting locally. And with San Rafael joining the other 6 Marin County jurisdictions that have already adopted climate declarations, as well as the literally thousands of communities worldwide that have done so, San Rafael is making its local action have global impact. I want to encourage the council to adopt the climate emergency declaration that has been prepared by staff with
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This is Ava Crisanti. I have questions about the validity of this whole proposal. It seems to me that you have a lot of well-meaning liberals calling in and so-called progressives saying, well, we need to have this climate emergency program, and very few of them are actually going to walk the walk. Most of them live in single-family homes. You're zoned mostly for single-family homes. The people with the smallest carbon footprint in San Rafael are actually the homeless. And when we look at how the city is treating the homeless, putting them in an internment camp that makes Manzanar look like the Ritz-Carlton, it really is, absolutely offensive. And Mayor Kate Collin, who, I've repeatedly asked for an explanation regarding the death of the unhoused woman under the freeway overpass, because her email from last November, almost a year ago, indicates that she and Katie Rice, then president of the Board of Supervisors, deliberately denied as few as 5 room key rooms to unhoused people living underneath the freeway overpass. I've asked repeatedly whether the woman who passed away was among those who died, and she was unable to tell me. I think, what we're seeing right now, the climate emergency is already here. There are people at the border. They are actually living very small. They're not going to be going home to these sumptuous, houses in Marin County. And yet these are the people that the good liberals in Mill Valley and San Rafael and Tiburon will turn a blind eye to.
Hi again, my name is Pam Reeves, and at the moment I'm representing Marin Conservation League, who highly applauds your actions today to go forward and approve this climate emergency declaration. And I just I am so respectful personally of staff and now you all for tackling this, because we are living in a bubble that's just waiting to burst. Our climate system is quickly unraveling, primarily human caused. Absent some ambitious intervention, the climate's great unraveling will accelerate. And it makes moral sense and economic sense. Preventing climate change, climate-based damage is almost always a bargain. Holding up our hands in despair is not an option when there is an action to be taken. The opposite of despair is courage. And I agree with the previous speaker. I appreciate her comments. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Jeff Rhodes, Resilient Shore. Resilient Shore supports the City Council's resolution to declare a climate emergency and the city's ongoing commitment for action. Preparation for climate change includes coordinating stakeholder-driven shore and watershed adaptation and Southeast San Rafael area plans. Moving diligently on these will enable our city and broader community to implement nature-based solutions that sequester carbon. Preparing the two plans concurrently coordinates planning decisions and implementation programs. Together, they create better places, protect the canal from gentrification, and result in a robust and fiscally sustainable city. Sustainable land use planning includes focusing future growth along our public transit spine, the North-South Greenway, SMART, and the freeways. Two projects currently under consideration can support a stronger transportation land use connection. The new downtown transit center offers an opportunity to create a transit hub and plaza with a restored and repurposed railroad depot, a lot like Mill Valley's. It frees up the old site for development supporting our downtown plan. Increasing transit use depends on creating a better and safer user experience and adjacent walkable density. This is the right time to address long-term 101-580 corridor issues. It's time to provide better access to Southeast San Rafael and a future smart ferry terminal closer to San Quentin. It's time to put the skunk on the table and address the mess at the Bellum interchange. Let's take this opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and serve critical needs. Let's not throw away our best shot. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and City Council members.
Hello?
Am I a third time?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi, my name is Sarah Spengeman. I am calling in from San Rafael, Terra Linda. I'm here with my 3-year-old daughter, who you might hear in the background. It's her story time, but being a mom, I felt that it was absolutely critical that I call in tonight. You talked about 2045, you'd be in your mid-70s. My daughter's going to be in her mid-20s. So we know that if we don't act now to take action to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, California may in fact become unlivable by the time my daughter is in her young adulthood. The climate crisis cannot be solved by any one jurisdiction or any one policymaker. It takes all municipalities, all states, and the federal government and countries around the world acting to reduce emissions in line with the Paris Agreement's goal of 1.5 degrees. And that means slashing emissions in half by about mid-century. So I'm calling in to speak strongly in support of the climate emergency declaration. And I'm also urging you to reevaluate our long-term goal as a city. We can do it. The solutions are out there. My husband and I installed a heat pump. We have an all-electric, gas-free building, and we're saving money on our utility bills. So the solutions that are out there are also solutions that are good for working families and will help clean up our air. And so it's a win-win. There's really no reason not to adopt this resolution and to follow through with the policies that'll get it done. So thank you so much for thinking of my daughter when you make a decision tonight.
Good evening. My name is Arlen Benavides, good evening, council members. My name is Arlen Benavides, and I am the Equity Planning and Outreach Manager at the Multicultural Center of Marin. And I speak today because the emergency of sea level rise in the canal, as well as other locations in San Rafael's jurisdiction, is our reality. And it's critical that the City of San Rafael expand its efforts in regards to carbon capturing management. In solidarity with the communities that the Multicultural Center serves, I encourage that the City Council to adopt the Climate Emergency Declaration Resolution, particularly because it's a conduit for strong cross-sector collaboration. It takes on ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and for its commitment to climate actions that further social equity, environmental justice, and economic vitality. Thanks so much.
Good evening. This is Bill Carney with Sustainable San Rafael. We urge the city's adoption of this strong climate emergency declaration tied to specific actions, these specific actions that are needed for us to do our part to achieve the statewide goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Actions like those you've already identified for the next 2 years of building electrification, electric vehicle adoption, and mandatory organics recycling. By declaring a climate emergency and backing that declaration with near-term action and ongoing attention, San Rafael affirms its place in a growing global mobilization to reverse the increasingly deadly specter of climate change. The declaration catalogs the severity of our current situation with recent science from the United Nations and other sources. It also points to the threats we're all experiencing firsthand in accelerating drought, heat waves, wildfires, smoke, storms, and sea level rise. The declaration outlines the urgency of acting now while clarifying the path forward towards resolving this critical crisis and emerging into a better future. And in keeping with that, we are very much in favor of the commitment in this resolution to enhancing equity and economic vitality through investments and policies that are necessary to get off fossil fuels. We also applaud the commitment to work with all other levels of government in partnership to accomplish these difficult goals. I want to thank you for your ongoing efforts to realistically address the deepening climate emergency with the full range of powers available to local government. Thanks.
Hello, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and members of the City Council. My name is Max Perret, and I'm with the Redwood Community Health Coalition, RCHC. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of our coalition of community health centers, including Marin Community Clinics, as well as Ritter Center, both of which are in San Rafael. I'm calling in tonight to thank you for all of your work on this important resolution and to thank the staff as well. I think it's imperative that we take immediate climate action, not only for the health of us and our children and grandchildren, but also for all of the reasons that our community health centers serve the people in our community. Social determinants of health are real and include such things as equitable transit, affordable housing, as well as looking at the impact from wildfires, sea level rise, flooding, and the like. Thank you so much for considering this. And as always, appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Well, hey, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey, council members, Gulati, Hill, and Kurtz, and I hope you won't mind if I especially say, Mr. Bitoff, thank you, thank you. This is a terrific declaration, and I know that a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into this. I also want to thank all the people who've dialed in, because so far you've gotten a lot of great feedback. Y'all have the best. Oh, but I forgot to tell you, I'm calling from Novato, just up the road. And I'm here to say y'all got the best meeting going. I do want to say that Eva Crisanti is right. There's a lot of challenges ahead for you. And I think, Corey, you left the door open when you said, you know, we're going to make sure we put our money where our mouth is. So I'm looking forward to that. Keep up the good work. You're an inspiration for us all. Thanks.
We do have 2 hands raised. The next is Harita. It seems that she's unable to provide comment due to an outdated version of Zoom. So if you could please email me at city.clerk@cityofsanrafael.org. Email me your telephone number and I'll call you and you can provide public comment over my cell phone.
Good evening, council members. My name is Annika Osborne. I'm a 17-year resident of San Rafael, and I represent my own views and speak on behalf of Cool the Earth, a local nonprofit with the mission to reduce carbon emissions and air pollution. Our Drive Clean Bay Area programs help consumers replace their gas cars with electric vehicles and e-bikes. I want to thank the City Council for your GHG reduction policies, and I encourage San Rafael to adopt a climate emergency resolution. And thank you, Corey, for your great partnership. We're already seeing the effects of the climate crisis here in San Rafael, causing hot weather events and sea level rise. Both climate change and air pollution impact communities of concern first and worst, and this is important to San Rafael. With the drought augmenting fire risk, we are now living in constant fear of fires. It is clear that our house, San Rafael, is on fire. We need to dramatically reduce fossil fuel combustion, which results in greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. With transportation representing such a large part of our individual carbon footprint, I think Corey said above 60% in San Rafael, it is essential that we quickly transition San Rafael residents and employees out of gas cars. According to the DMV Q2 2021 report, we currently have 1,394 EVs in San Rafael, as compared to 31,930 gas cars, internal combustion engines. So EVs represent 4% of our cars in San Rafael. To meet GHG targets, we need about 50% of all cars in San Rafael to be electric by 2030. So we suggest that the city speed up this transition and focus on electric vehicles. Of course, we recommend walking, biking, carpooling, public transit, and e-biking in place of commuting, errands, and in gas cars. Drive Clean Bay Area is here to help you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Marilyn Price. I'm in the Valley here. And actually, I'm so pleased that you are considering this issue. When I first thought of it several years ago, actually, I thought of it many, many years ago, but one of the reasons I formed a committee that we're working here in Marin to get all of our cities and many of our entities to pass. And to me, the important thing, going back to what Corey was saying, is that we reach the people out there, not the environmentalists, but everybody else, to realize we are in an emergency and we need everyone to pitch in. I'm hoping, I called the IJ this morning, and I'm hoping that if there's any press here, that they really, put this front and center. Again, we have to wake up our citizens. And I thank you so much. You're going to be setting an example for the remaining cities that we want to see follow suit. Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, and I have not received an email yet. Oh, we have one more hand raised. This allows us some time.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all. This is Belle Cole. I'm chair of OFA Marin and an advocacy group fighting to reverse climate change since 2009. And OFA Marin strongly supports the city's adoption of the strong climate emergency declaration and what it will lead to. And we want to also support Bill Carney's letter. Especially, I want to emphasize the critical mandatory organic recycling that he mentions, because it guarantees reduction of GHG generated by landfill waste, as well as reduction of natural resource depletion through recycling. That's one of the three sources that he mentions. I also want to say kudos for a CER that is a statement of clarity, aggressiveness, and above all, leadership. As the largest city, Marin was not only in alignment, but by resetting the long-term reduction goal, you have made it possible to take advantage of state mandates and opportunities. Urgency is crucial, and I want to state the stakes are high here in San Rafael. This is essential. California has more than 7,300 wildfires so far this year, but through ESP, we have reported that recent vegetation best management practices recognize that actions taken to reduce wildfire risk will also reduce carbon emissions and reduce fires. I want to invite you to a meeting tomorrow of ESP on the subject of where does the carbon go, and I've listed it, and I hope you can join us. And I'm really thrilled with the quality and the aggressiveness of the CED. Thank you very much for doing it and all the work that went in.
So right now I see no hands raised. We'll give everyone a few more seconds. If you're calling in, you'll need to press *9. And if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature. I see no further hands.
Thank you, City Clerk Laura. I'll close the public hearing then and bring the matter back to the council for its consideration. First, I'd like to turn to Manager Bidoff. In all of those largely supportive comments, was there anything in there that you wanted to address or anything that you would like to add before the council deliberates this matter?
Thank you. It's funny. I was just thinking about Belle's last comment and the combination of mandatory organics and the opportunity for carbon farming, and just the opportunity there is twofold, right? So it's reducing the greenhouse gas emissions while also sequestering the carbon, and how I feel like there's such an opportunity space there. And we're hoping that through our process of implementation of SB 1383 that we can uncover some good ways to be able to enable more carbon farming. So I want to thank her for that. Thank you.
Sounds great. All right, then I will turn to the, hopefully, can you hear me with just one? Okay. All right. I will turn to Councilmember comments then, and I will begin with Councilmember Kurtz.
Well, thank you to everyone who commented. It's so important. And I had some of these conversations yesterday at the gathering at Sustainable San Rafael. So really appreciate everyone sharing their opinions and thoughts tonight. Couldn't agree more. We do need to back this action with direct work. And that is going to be our challenge, and we need to do it. And I hope that we can actually beat our 2045 date, because it does affect everyone at all levels. It's disappointing to hear other organizations and groups who use, and countries really, who use climate change as that bargaining chip, because it is such an important issue for everyone right now, and it needs to be identified in so many things that we do. We are so fortunate in our community to have so many committed people from every area and every corner of the county to be able to bring their expertise to this conversation. And we're very fortunate to have Corey in our backyard to work with us on this, to move this forward, because otherwise it would just be a piece of paper. And so we really do need to have everyone's help and input, because it's going to take a lot to make this work. So, but thank you. I'm happy to support this as it moves forward.
Thank you. We'll next turn to Councilmember Lorenz Galati.
Thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to echo Councilmember Kurtz and really recognize Corey Bitoff from our staff. I'm a big fan. He's amazing. And I think a lot of what is happening right now is thanks to him. So really appreciate his knowledge and his passion, and really the way that he puts it in a way that is doable, because as some of the people that they were commenting, climate change is huge. And so it's nice to have a really clear path in order to have success. Also appreciate all the people that they've been calling and commenting. As somebody was mentioning, climate change doesn't understand about countries or states or counties, cities. It's affecting all of us. And climate change is also very connected to equity or inequity. And, everybody in our communities, they need protection from different environmental hazards, and also have access to environmental benefits for all, regardless of income or race or other characteristics. And that's why I'm so excited about the workforce development in our community. Climate change is affecting disproportionately our low-income communities, our communities of colors, indigenous people, and our immigrant communities. And these communities are also the least responsible for some of the climate change emissions. So we need to implement, and design solutions with them in mind. When we are thinking about EV, cars and chargers, and we are thinking about our neighbors in the canal, we need like an equity fund for them to be able to afford this, because I'm so thankful to be working with MCE, TEM, and a lot of different partners, but with the incentives that they are provided right now to have like an electric car, if it costs $30,000 to get a car and you get $10,000 rebate, you still have to be able to afford $20,000. And a lot of people cannot do that. So I'm excited to continue the conversations and see how we can start thinking about that. How can we support our low-income community around EV chargers, around composting and garbage, when you live in apartments and you depend on your landlord. So a lot of work to do, but really excited to definitely support this resolution. So thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I concur with Councilmember Micah and Councilmember Kurtz's comments. I specifically would like to elaborate and amplify Councilmember Micah's comments about equity. This clearly presents us with the opportunity to do what is right. So thank you for calling that out. In addition, and I think it was mentioned in the comments, is the focus on the fourth party here, which is the future generations that will inherit what we have done. And even as Corey had mentioned earlier, even if we were to shut all of our GHG off tomorrow, there would still be a negative impact to the future. So this emergency declaration is timely, yes, but there is much more we can do. And I look forward to working with community and our regional stakeholders to bring as much amplification to this moment as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with all of my colleagues. There's much work to do, and the equity issue is a big one, and one that we shouldn't be ignoring. One thing that I would like to focus a little bit on is our history with doing this. Corey, was it 2009 that we did the first climate action plan? Is that right? See, I can remember some things. Yeah. So we're in year 12 of this. We have a long history, and we have incredible expertise in Corey and the other members of city staff as well that contribute to these analysis. And so I think we've demonstrated our willingness to be in this for the long haul, to take on the work, and to broaden our lens to include the equity issues that really have, to some extent, been a little bit more recently coming to the forefront. So we're ready to take those on as well. So that concludes my comments. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion? Yes.
I'll be very happy to make a motion to adopt the resolution to adopt a climate emergency declaration and establishing a new long-term target for greenhouse gas reductions.
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. City Clerk Laura, please call the roll.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Yonens Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
Aye. Matter carries 4-0. Thank you. Moving on to the local part of this issue. Manager Biddulph, would you like to present the staff report?
Sure, thank you. And I'll share my screen one more time. And it's not forwarding. Let's see.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing. We've resolved our technical difficulty and we'll be ready to go at 8:09.
To resume this meeting of the San Rafael City Council. Manager Bidoff, you were about to begin your presentation.
Thank you. So the grand jury came out with a report about climate change and how should Marin adapt in September of 2020, and we responded within the 90-day window in November. And we had 2 items on there that we determined required further analysis. The grand jury has since come back to us to ask for a date that we would reply by, and it's past 6 months now. So we decided that we would finalize the report and bring that forward rather than just provide a date and then come back at a later date. So overall, the overarching theme is that the report was a wonderful report, really well done. Totally agree with most of the findings and that we need to do better coordination countywide. If you look at the responses from the various cities and towns related to these 2 recommendations, you'll find them all over the place, that the different cities and towns in the county responded differently to these 2 recommendations, which points to why we decided to respond the way we did with this final response. So I will, let's see, there we go. You see my messy slide? So this was recommendation R1. The Board of Supervisors, in collaboration with the municipalities and other agencies affected by climate change, should convene a multi-jurisdictional task force referred to in this report as the Marin Climate Adaptation Task Force, charged with developing a single comprehensive multi-jurisdictional adaptation strategy for all of Marin. So our recommended revised response is that this recommendation will not be implemented. And as I said, I'd like to be able to say at this time, or will be continue to be considered, because it's not that this recommendation is a poor one. It's just that at this time, there's no general agreement amongst all the jurisdictions that this is the right way to go. Whether a big multi-jurisdictional agency of all agencies affected by climate change should be developed is something that I think requires still further analysis. So because we need to respond, we're responding that it won't be implemented at this time. But we're committed to pursuing countywide collaboration. We understand that it's super important to do. We even have in our general plan that we should work with the county and other entities to consider developing a JPA, much like the wildfire JPA. And so it could eventually come to pass. But at this point, again, with the benefit of now seeing all the responses from all the other cities and towns and the discrepancy in all the responses, it doesn't feel like the right thing that we can commit to at this time. That said, what we are doing is we're working countywide through the local hazard mitigation plan process, which is a natural way for us to kind of get our heads around all these different climate impacts and other impacts as well. To me, it makes most sense to separate any type of disaster from a climate disaster when you're planning this way. We're also working Bay Area wide with the BCDC's Bay Adapt, Adapting to Rising Tide programs, Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network, and we're keeping our eye on Plan Bay Area and the new things that are coming out of there. So we're really trying to get an understanding of how we might participate in a region-wide activity as well. And there are lots of other collaborations right now that you see on the screen. So we have the Hazard Mitigation Plan, there's the Bay Wave Sea Level Rise Program, and just thinking about sea level rise and all the challenges with that and coordinating countywide just alone with sea level rise and flooding is very daunting. So to reiterate, it's a worthy thing to pursue. We just can't commit to implementing now. And so that's the recommended response that I brought forward. For recommendation R4, each member of the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership should declare its support for broadening the partnership's mission and increasing its funding as necessary to enable it to support overall climate change planning efforts, including both mitigation and adaptation in cities, towns, and other member agencies throughout the county. So similarly, this response was different amongst all the different jurisdictions. Our revised response, the recommended response again, is that this recommendation will not be implemented. And the thing with Marin Climate Energy Partnership is a small group of staff that are working in a very focused way to implement our climate action plans and to develop these climate action plans and the greenhouse gas inventories. It's kind of got a sweet spot. So personally, from my view, it works really well that way. It does have in its mission adaptation planning, but I'm not convinced that they're all the right people at the table in this group to add that. And it also can get a little unwieldy when your focus gets too wide. And in conversations with other MCEP members and seeing again the discrepancy of the way that people have responded, again, the revised response that I recommend is that it will not be implemented this time. I think there's a role for MCEP at some point in the future, but whether that's a limited role, whether it's a very specific adaptation planning piece, whether that's specifically related to extreme heat or something, I don't really know at this point. So this is my best attempt at giving some good responses that I think align with our overall goals and with what I'm seeing in the community as we work across jurisdictions to understand the best way for adaptation going forward. So again, as a recap, I agree with the sentiment of the report, and none of the other changes or responses that we issued the first time, which I know a lot of you were not here during the first response period, would stay the same, and we would revise R1 and R4 from requires further analysis to will not be implemented at this time. So I'll take any questions or comments that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with questions from council members, and I'll start with Councilmember Lorenz Gulati.
Actually, I don't have any questions. I agree with Manager Bitoff. So thank you. Thank you so much for the answer to the report.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I concur with my colleague, Councilmember Micah.
Councilmember Kurtz.
I do have a question. Corey, how much of your time is spent participating in each of the individual organizations' meetings? I mean, maybe you could do high level. I mean, are you participating, representing San Rafael in many of these different organizations?
Yes, and it's sporadic. It's a lot of work. It's a steep learning curve. There's so much happening. There's so many regional agencies, so many practitioners that are grappling with these issues. There are studies and reports and articles, and it's pretty daunting. It's a big lift.
Thank you.
Thank you, then. And we will turn to public comment on this matter. City Clerk Lara, would you please present our public commenters?
Yeah, to comment on Zoom, please use the raised hand feature. And if you're participating and would like to comment by telephone, please press *9. Once you've heard the notification that we are inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide public comment, and then will be muted once time has elapsed. I do see 2 hands raised at the moment.
This is Jeff Rhodes. Corey, I think that your findings are really prudent and realistic. It seems to me that, if anything, what a countywide organization can be doing is looking at areas where there are shared interests. The topography and geomorphic characteristics of the county are so different than other places around the bay. We're kind of each isolated by the ridges that separate us and that sort of thing. It seems to me that the fundamental responsibility of coordination falls at a regional level and working with regional resource agencies. I think that it isn't really prudent for us to invest a tremendous amount of energy in this. We really need to focus on solving these problems locally with our own local stakeholders and our own community-based organizations. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bill Carney again, Sustainable San Rafael. Yeah, I think the city's response to the grand jury at this point in time is reasonable and does move us, in fact, towards closer coordination, as we've heard discussed tonight, countywide to address climate change. But as the climate crisis continues to accelerate, we do need to remain institutionally nimble to allow timely and effective responses to these changing conditions. So to that end, we've provided you belatedly today a letter that we wrote actually when this was being considered back in November, and some diagrams from that explain, take a look at how things might be organized in countywide, building on a lot of the stuff you've heard tonight. So I invite you to take a look at that with an eye towards the future. We agree that Drawdown Marin, with a board made up of both government and citizen members, offers a promising framework for comprehensive climate action, especially action aimed at reducing the causes of climate change at the same time that we address its impact. And that nexus is really critical, that we do both. We think that will require ongoing and increasing support from the county, both financially and both financial and policy support, as well as increased support for the staff collaborations that happen at Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. So we see all that in the future. We also suggest stronger involvement of the business community going forward. So it's going to take all of us pulling together to address an issue as large as climate change. And we appreciate San Rafael's openness and Corey's leadership in continuing to forge these alliances. Thank you.
As of right now, I see no other hands raised, but I'll give everyone about 5 seconds. Once again, if you've called in, you'll need to press *9. And if you're using Zoom, you'll need to use the raised hand feature. I see no public comment.
Thank you, City Clerk. I will bring the matter back to the City Council for deliberation. We will start with Councilmember Lorenz Gulati.
Yeah, no further comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to draw down Marine and see what's going to happen there, because I agree that that would be a good, good point of reference for the rest of the county. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Corey, for your long time work on this. Clearly, I think what I took away, and I think you concurred with this in your comments and what was submitted, is that there are a lot of existing regional stakeholders already at play here. I think at this point, as you've said, is probably the best way to go. And I appreciated actually the comment that I heard from Bill Carney earlier around institutionally nimble. I thought that was a great comment. So thank you for that, setting up that disposition.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Yeah, I will just add, Corey, we can't replicate you. And we know we need to do a lot of work locally. So I totally agree. We cannot take on the direction of doing this on our own and creating something and bringing those pieces together. We need to look to others, and we will also participate. So I absolutely agree. And I also echo Bill's comments that this is a need to be nimble, and we will go forward with this work. And so I really appreciate your recommendations on this.
Thank you. I have two comments. One is, as a former member of the civil grand jury, I'm always delighted to see thorough and thoughtful responses to the reports. Some jurisdictions are not so much. And my final comment is that the reason that San Rafael is in the place that we are with this long history is because of the hard work of Corey Bidoff over a decade now. This leadership and analysis and thoughtful and patient leading through these issues, being nimble when we can, and being persuasive when we need to. So, Corey, thank you for bringing us to this position. We're not there yet. There's still lots of challenges ahead of us, but we couldn't do it without the long history that you have brought us. That concludes then our discussion. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure.
Anyone?
I can make the motion. I'd like to, would you like to go, Councilmember Micah?
No, I went the last one, so you go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we approve a resolution approving and authorizing the mayor to execute the City of San Rafael's final response to the 2019-2020 Marin County Civil Grand Jury Report entitled Climate Change, How Will Marin Adapt?
And I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Hill. Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Lorenz Gulati.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
Aye. Matter carries 4-0. Thank you all. We'll move on to our final item for this evening. And I will call for a staff report. There you are. Thank you. Let's begin with the staff report on item 6C.
All right. Thank you. And I'm assuming you could see my screen just fine. Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and council members. Tonight, I will be going over fiscal year 2021 final amendments and providing a brief update on fiscal year 21-22. So let's jump right in. As we've been communicating to you and our community members over the last 6 months, the 2021 fiscal year provided us with some welcome surprises. At this point, our revised revenues are approximately $87.1 million, which is 15% above the originally adopted budget. Our largest increases in revenues pertain to sales and use tax of approximately $10 million, in which $1 million is attributed to our new Measure R use tax. Although we did project sales and use tax to be higher than originally budgeted, it was the last 2 payments received in July and August pertaining to May and June, which really got us to the ultimate peak. They were much higher than in previous months. That said, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the increases in property transfer tax, excess educational revenue augmentation, which is ERAF, CARES Act funds of $737,000, and an uptick in building permit fees. These increases were, however, reduced by other revenue decreases, of which the largest was transient occupancy tax, often referred to as TOT, of a bit over $1 million. In regards to expenses, I sound like a broken record here, but as you may remember, budgeted expenses for this year were reduced substantially in preparation for any COVID-19 negative impacts to revenues. And I'm proud to report that although total revenues are not impacted, staff continued to adhere to the budget and stayed within the reduced expense threshold. So for other funds, the 2 main points that I'd like to hit are in relation to the transfer of an additional $500,000 to the Recreation Fund to support operations as revenues for this fund were impacted. And the second, we decreased transfers from the Gas Tax Fund to the General Fund of $1 million. In the original budget, the Gas Tax Fund was scheduled to transfer an additional $1 million, which it normally wouldn't do, but it was doing so to help offset revenue losses that we had anticipated for COVID. But since the city fared better than expected, the $1 million was not transferred and will therefore be allocated towards capital improvement projects. And then as we work through the year-end audit, we are expecting net unassigned funds of approximately $6 to $7 million. Of this, $5.5 million has been earmarked to planned expenses in the upcoming years. $520K will be going towards our emergency fund, and that's something that we needed to make whole from last year since we borrowed a little bit, and then the remainder is for this year. $533,000 is earmarked for the furlough repayments that were made this year in fiscal year 21-22. And the remainder is earmarked for the recently approved 3-year compensation contracts. Fiscal year 21-22, well, we're in September, so we haven't had a quarter of activity yet. But as we move into fiscal year 21-22, revenues and expenses are looking to be on track. However, on Friday, we did receive our first sales and use tax payment for the year, which was the July remittance, and it continues to be higher than expected. We'll be meeting with our sales tax consultants and we'll report back to you if we determine budget changes should be made, but we're really trying to dig into whether or not these are catch-ups because during COVID times, businesses were allowed to defer some of their payments, and so now they have to be making them again. So we are seeing catch-ups, but we also want to make sure that there isn't something that's being missed or being allocated to the City of San Rafael versus another city. So we'll be digging into that detail tremendously with them. And then the only other item as of now for fiscal year 21-22 is the request of a new position. This is a housing program manager position. It has minimal fiscal impact to the general fund as it would be replacing a fixed term management analyst. And it's partially covered by the general plan fund since they'll be working on a lot of general plan objectives. Lastly, this position would support the City Council goals and objectives as it's housing and homelessness focused. And these days, it wouldn't be a budget update if I didn't bring up ARPA. Our American Rescue Plan Act funding, we will not be receiving another payment to the second 50% until 11 months from now, but we did file our first compliance report, which was submitted in August. August 31st was the due date. And the use of funds continue to be focused on the city's policy focus areas. We're still working through what exactly will be used by the ARPA money, but we will be tracking all of the ARPA funding by project. So you will have, the opportunity to review reports of expenditures by project. And certainly, if anything is over the $75,000 threshold, it would be brought to council anyways. So you get to review it twice, essentially. And so with that, I ask that you adopt both resolutions, and I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Director Haid, we will start with questions from council members. We'll back to the list we used first on the first item. So Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Director Haid, for that report. I had one question. When it comes to the treatment of the ARPA funds, it sounds like we're deferring a bit on the treatment of that. What are maybe the best way to try to think of an easy way to ask a question on this? What are kind of the options in terms of how we can do it? It sounds like there might be extremes in terms of how we treat those funds, or maybe it just has to do with how those funds are spent and how we want to characterize them. Can you talk a little bit further about why there's a deferral on how we treat those funds?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So the interim final rule is still being reviewed. We had all made comments to it. It was issued by the state and the federal government, and we had all made comments to it, all of the agencies that were receiving monies, basically asking for clarification on certain things, trying to understand if treatments that we understood to be appropriate were or were not, because it was pretty general. And so that has not been finalized yet, but we have received additional, guidance and news. And so I could tell you a few things. One, there's basically 4 eligible ways that you can spend the ARPA money. 3 of them are pretty restrictive. It's, focused on, I'm going to try to recall these off memory, so I may not get them all, but basically focused on bandwidth. So bandwidth projects, sewer and water projects. If we paid out premiums during COVID, but the interesting part is they're starting it effective March 3rd, 2021. And so those types of things would have happened in 2020. So it's very difficult to collect on that. And then homelessness is one of them, and so that will help us, and economic recovery. And so those are essentially the ways, the eligibilities. The other eligible item, or the other eligible way, is based on how much you've lost, how much revenues you've lost, or you lost in the base year. So it would be calendar year, January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. And we've done that calculation, and it's really surprising, but we had such a great year. Well, let me think about this. Yeah, we had such a great year for fiscal year 18-19, so ending June 30th, 2019, that what we would have expected based on the calculation that we were required to follow is about a $20 million increase or something like that for the following year, which definitely did not happen. But based on that, per the guidelines and the rules, because we're eligible for that, we can use that money towards general services. So it becomes a lot more general and not as restrictive. We are, however, waiting for the final rule to come out, because the last thing we would want to do is expend this money and then have to come back and say, nope, they didn't approve it. It's a ton. It's $8 million that we have right now, and our total allocation amount is 16. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but really the first few uses, the eligibility is difficult to obtain. And then the last one, we believe we're eligible for, and we've done all of the calculations based on the way that they wrote it in their interim final rule, but we are waiting for additional clarification and confirmation.
Got it. And I'm pretty much assuming that every other municipality is in a very similar boat as we are with respect to that.
No, it's interesting. I've been talking to a fair amount of my colleagues, and some of them received more than the calculation would have created as far as revenue losses. And so they're scrambling, trying to figure out ways that they can continue to use and obtain this money, but they have to be eligible. So some of them have, other funds that they do bandwidth projects out of or things like that. So they're really trying to work with their committees so that they could be moving some of this around. So I consider us lucky in a sense. I mean, unfortunately, this all had to happen, but lucky in that we most likely are qualifying for this.
Thank you.
And I would just add, Director Haid, we're very lucky that we have you to monitor all of these unfolding complicated financial issues. We'll move on to Councilmember Kurtz for questions.
The question's along the same line as Councilmember Hill's. And I think you may have just answered this, but I just want to double check. We're able to spend, we're able to use these funds, the next half of them, as they come through, the relief funds. Do we think that they're going to be changing the rules around the second allocation? It'll be the same. So, okay. All right. And then we have it, if our projects or how we think we're going to spend it fit, we're able to spend that amount.
Correct.
Great. So we're not leaving anything on the table.
No.
Okay.
We have a lot of capital improvement projects that are unfunded, so we're going to need every dollar.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. And finally, Councilmember Lorenz Gulati.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So yeah, thank you so much, Director Haid, for this, because what a great problem to have, I guess, when you get these surprises. And it's just always amazes me how you have your plan and your presentation for Monday, and then 2 days before you just get like, oh wait, there's something else. So really appreciate you, keeping up with everything that is going on. I cannot imagine, some of these forgivable grants or loans, that they are happening at the government level. I deal with them at the small business level, and it's a nightmare. So really appreciate you being on top of everything and just make sure that these funds will be truly available and we won't have to return them. So also happy to see the allocation. I think is really wonderful to see how we can recognize the staff from the city. And when the time came and they had to, do cuts on expenses, and also when we had to do like furloughing people, that now we can actually give back. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have just one question before we go to public comment. And it's not about ARPA. It's about the sales tax revenue forecast. For several months now, our forecasts have been wrong. And I understand that you have instituted an investigation to find out, to get to the bottom of this, to see if we should be adjusting our forecast. Do you have any sense of when you might be able to have an answer to that?
I would like to say yes. And unfortunately, I'm truly not quite sure, because it's not one thing that's happening. It's everything that has happened over the period of these 18 months, where we've got deferred payments. So businesses who haven't paid for the last year that are now starting to pay, businesses that have closed, businesses that have opened. So those are sometimes offsetting. the city of San Rafael was lucky enough to have increased sales tax on auto and transportation because that's one of our largest generators. But now we're expecting autos to either, to basically stop increasing, the sale of autos to stop increasing, but they're thinking they're leveling out, not necessarily decreasing. But then just last night, I was reading one of my fund finance magazines, and they're talking about, the price of cars continuing to increase. And so you continue to hear so many different thought processes and, market indicators that they're changing. And then we hear something from our tax consultants, and then I read something different. We hear something from the state of California. So we really are digging into it and doing what we can. HDL has been wonderful, but they too are very frustrated because we count on them because they have all the information from the state. The state feeds all of the detail into HDL's system, and we don't have access to that system. So we can only have the reports that they give us, and we can ask the questions that, we come up with, but it's not at, our fingertips. All that detail is not at our fingertips. And so I do end up relying more on their analysis and their projections, but I am starting to consider whether or not I should be inflating them by 1 or 2% based on an average of 18 months. But I would not be happy giving you inflated numbers if in 6 months they started decreasing again. And so I'm hoping in the next quarter we will have better or more information, and we'll see if it's going to kind of stay steady.
Right, I understand it's hard to untangle all these interacting causes, and if we have to have forecasts that are off, I guess we'd rather have those forecasts be lower so that the pleasant surprise of additional revenue. But at the same time, we want to move towards accurate forecasts. So
right, yeah, the informal term that we use in finance is sandbagging, and no one wants to do that ever.
Right.
And so
at least not consistently.
Yeah, in either direction. And so we're very cognitive of that, and we do want to get to the bottom of it. It's just been very difficult. And also the other factor is the stimulus payments and unemployment. Those have really contributed to consumer spending. And so now, you think that people would save the money in the bank, but that's absolutely not happening. Consumer spending has increased over the last year, but now with some of those going away, or decreasing, that might play a role in that as well.
Right. Thank you. It's time now to turn to the public. City Clerk Laura, please present our public commenters.
To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. And if you're commenting by telephone, please press *9. Once you've heard the notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide public comments, and they will be muted once time has elapsed. And I do have one speaker.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Bushey and City Council members. This is Victoria DeWitt. We are asking you to broaden your current goal of adopting a street tree ordinance to include a more comprehensive San Rafael tree ordinance. San Rafael has beautiful tree-lined streets gracing many of our neighborhoods. There's no question that we must maintain and protect our street trees. But there are also trees being threatened by development that need protection, such as in the West End where 9 mature redwood trees are being slated for removal. 2 of them with 35 and 37-inch diameters, which would be considered heritage trees by the Marin County Tree Ordinance, but San Rafael has no such definition. These trees have lived in San Rafael much longer than any of us, and yet they have no voice. A project in Gerstle Park proposes removing approximately 58 trees. The city's current policy of replacing every tree removed with 3 new trees is simply not working. We need to duplicate or to at least duplicate the environmental and biological benefits of trees being replaced. We are asking for your assistance to form a working group to develop a comprehensive tree ordinance for all of San Rafael's trees. There are so many cities, many are designated Tree Cities USA like San Rafael, that have adopted effective and comprehensive tree ordinances that can provide guidance for us. Arbor Day Foundation, the organization behind Tree Cities USA, offers guidance as well. We are asking Councilmember Lorenz Scoletti as our sustainability liaison to assist in forming a working group, including city staff, many who have already invested their time in drafting language for the maintenance of our street trees, along with members of the public to help move this goal forward to become a reality before we lose more irreplaceable trees. Thank you.
I see no other hands raised. I'll give everyone a couple of seconds. I see no further public comment.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing then and bring the matter back for consideration by the council. I will first turn to Director Haid. I'm taking the comment from Ms. DeWitt about a street tree ordinance as a general recommendation on the city's budget. Would you have anything to say to that request?
I don't, other than based on council guidance and city management guidance, if that becomes something that we want to work into our plan. If we receive the instruction to do so, we will work on that.
Thank you very much.
Nadine, this is Bill Guerin. Vice Mayor Bushey, we are working on a tree ordinance. We're focusing on the street trees as a starting point for that. The city has not had a tree ordinance in the past, and we think it's important to have something to guide us with our tree policy as we are a tree city. We're focusing first on the street trees because that is where I think people are most impacted by what San Rafael does. But our intention is to move from there into a broader based tree ordinance in the future. Our 2021 goal is for street trees, but we're going to continue to pursue that goal and have an ordinance that focuses on the city's trees and the tree policy for San Rafael in the future.
Thank you for that additional information, Director Guerin. The street tree ordinance, of course, is not on the agenda. We're just focusing on the overall budget, which is our agenda item. So we'll take that as being within the general scope of budgetary things that we might be thinking about as we go forward. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. It's back to the council. Final for comments and hopefully a motion. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have no comments except gratitude again for your leadership and stewardship of our city's finances, Director Haid, and your entire team for continuing to look with wisdom and accuracy under every nook and cranny for whatever signs we can get on how to best consider the future with respect to where we are in our past. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kurtz.
No additional questions. Thank you for the update and the report. Happy to make a motion when it's time.
Thank you. Councilmember Lorenz Scoletti.
Yeah, I echo the sentiment from my fellow council members around the gratitude for Dr. Haid and also her team. Is really nice to see that the city is in really good hands. So thank you.
Thank you. This would be the time if someone would like to make a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion. It looks like we have two. Is that correct?
Excellent point. Yes.
Okay, so the first one is make a motion to adopt resolution adopting amendments to the City of San Rafael budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 for the purpose of confirming authorized appropriations and transfers.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. City Clerk Lar, please call the roll.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz,
Aye.
Councilmember Yeren Skalati,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
Aye. Matter carries 4-0. Would someone like to make another motion?
I'll follow up with that. Recommend to adopt a resolution adopting amendments for fiscal year 2021-2022 for the purposes of personnel changes.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. City Clerk Laura, please call the roll.
Councilmember Hill,
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz,
Aye.
Councilmember Yeren Skalati,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Bushey.
Aye. Matter carries 4-0. That brings us to the end of our agenda as the successor agent. We have no successor agency on matters tonight. Thank you, everyone, for carrying on without our very able Mayor Kate. She's hopefully enjoying a well-deserved family vacation. So this meeting of the San Rafael City Council is adjourned.